Welcome. My name is Ian Gordon. I'm a science librarian at Brock University. I'm excited to talk to you about my research topic and study entitled Information Seeking Strategies in Academic, Scholarly, and Scientific Research Communities. This presentation and the content is licensed by a Creative Commons license. I'd be more than willing to share this with you, but the citation for this, if you'd like to use it and where to find it, I'd be happy to show you this during questions and comments at the end of this presentation. People look and seek for information all the time. Whether they're researchers or family members or yourself, you need good answers to good questions. But where do you look? How do you search? What databases or methods do you use? And how do you feel about the results that you're getting? These sorts of questions are endemic to our lived experiences, but academic researchers such as mathematicians, chemists, and physicists need to answer these questions all the time to stay current with research, to inform their best practices, and to help them perform research in a timely and sustainable manner. These questions form the basis of my particular research study. Research questions I asked and supporting research questions, the main three questions I'd like to share with you. First one is, how do academics perceive their abilities to stay on top of the literature in their specific disciplines? The second research question is, how do academics perceive their abilities to stay on top of the literature in their specific disciplines? How do they do it? What are their abilities and how do they think about it? And the last question I'd like to share as part of my research is, how do scientists feel about meeting their My name is Ian Gordon. I'm an academic librarian at Brock University in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. I'd like to share insights and observations and results of a study I've recently completed entitled Information Seeking Strategies in Academic, Scholarly, and Scientific Research Communities. This content has been copyrighted and it has been shared with a Creative Commons license. If you'd like to talk to me about using the content or borrowing it or using this citation, I'd be willing to answer any questions at the end of this presentation as part of comments and questions. Information seeking is endemic to all learned behavior. What do we look for? How do we look for it? And how do we feel about the results that we're getting? Whether we're looking for medicine, we're looking for strategies to take trips. But academic researchers in academic communities like universities ask these questions all the time as mathematicians, as physicists, and chemists when they need to stay on top of the literature, they need to be informed of what's happening, and they need to be productive and sustainable in negotiating their research and their research teams as well. This study over 5 years involved a series of research questions, and I'd like to share with you three questions that we asked. The first question was, how do academics perceive their abilities to stay on top of the literature in their specific disciplines? Second research question was, how do academics perceive their abilities? Hello, my name is Ian Gordon. I'm an academic librarian at Brock University Library. I'd like to share my research, my findings and observations as they pertain to a research study and a number of studies I've completed with colleagues entitled Information Seeking Strategies in Academic, Scholarly, and Scientific Research Communities. These slides and the content is licensed by a Creative Commons license. There's a citation that you may use to copy content from this freely, but if you have any questions or comments or need access to the original content and data, please contact me or ask me at the end of this presentation. Information seeking is endemic to all human behavior. We ask questions, we seek answers to questions, good questions, and we constantly look for things as time evolves and events happen. This is particularly true to academics, whether they use their phone or mobile device or computers, on completing research in an academic institution as chemists, physicists, and mathematicians. It informs their practice, how much time they dedicate, and what other people are doing. And it informs their actually research studies as well, whether it be faculty, postdocs, or graduate students. My research study involved 3 particular questions I'd like to share with you now. The first question was, how do academics perceive their abilities to stay on top of the literature in their specific disciplines? The second question we used was, what strategies, databases, and tools do these scholars use to remain up to date? The third question that guided our research was, how do scientists feel about meeting their evolving information needs? To summarize, how do they feel about how they're keeping up to date, and what strategies do they use? And then how do they feel about it, whether they're successful or not? The research design for all 3 studies followed the same methodology. The research involved 10 university librarians, including myself, that asked these 3 research questions. In total, 538 faculty, staff, or graduate students at a number of universities across Ontario over a 5-year period were involved in these studies. The study methodology was a 2-phase mixed method research design, involved our group of scientists. The first phase involved information seeking and data collected using a Qualtrics survey of researchers. The first phase then concluded with data analysis using basic statistical standard methodologies to aggregate and find answers to basic questions about information seeking. The second phase, which followed soon after, involved interviews and focus groups of these researchers that interpreted the first phase data. Second phase transcripts were analyzed as we had focus groups and group information studies using qualitative methods to discover emergent themes. Results for each group, meaning we involved studies of chemists, mathematicians, and then physicists, were done separately, and we interpreted the results for all colleagues and for all studies. Manuscripts were completed and submitted for peer review publication in a scientific journal. And the data for all these studies, including the manuscripts, were archived in a registered digital repository for future use and consultation. The good news about this was articles were published in 2018 dealing with chemists, 2020 for mathematicians, and the final of these 3 papers was published in 2022 about physicists. What are the findings of these 3 studies, or what commonalities can we find about these research questions that we've reviewed? A couple points was, when we asked how successful are you at keeping up to date with news and scholarly information in your field, a majority of participants, 54.1, said they were somewhat successful at using a variety of resources. 31.8% of all participants noted and selected, not really, I could do better in being up to date. Minority of participants, 14.4, said they were successful. I believe I keep on top of new developments. Of the 538 participants that involved in this study, it's kind of troubling to know that a majority of participants said they were somewhat successful. A significant number, 14.1%, a small minority proportion, said that they were successful, but 31.8% of participants said they weren't successful at all, whether they be faculty, staff, or graduate students. Another question that we asked, and here's a finding: how successful are you at keeping up to date with news and scholarly information in your field? We asked them what databases they consulted when keeping up to date with scholarly information. We've ranked these findings and the names of databases in order of 1 meaning most important to 4 being least important. Google Scholar and Archive, which is a preprint server, was universally accepted as a good place to go, a universal place to go, and a good first place to go. The second ranking of Web of Science, Scopus, where second places are of less importance, were important to most researchers, but those were indication of interdisciplinary tools or databases researchers use to stay up to date. Disciplinary tools like MathSciNet for math, SciFinderN for chemists, and InSpec for physicists were important, but least important amongst these groups of ranked databases they consulted. And the last or fourth category of other disciplinary databases, there are many of them, very specific, open databases, repositories, software, social media that people used were equally important, but less ranked in an importance overall. When you look at these databases, the questions that you ask is Google Scholar and Archive are pretty blunt instruments. They don't incorporate large swaths of particular parts of research. And the fourth entry, other disciplinary databases, it was amazing to find that each researcher used a different number of databases, used them differently, but also find the database that worked for them in doing their research and remaining up to date. Emergent themes that came from this research were, in asking the question, how successful are you at keeping up to date with news and scholarly information in your field, was too much information and not enough time to keep up to date. Universally, all researchers said there's just thousands of articles that come out each day, and I don't have the time when doing research and teaching and scholarship to dedicate much time to this, to find these sources, to itemize them and keep them to one side so I can consult them, but then reading them in their totality and incorporating them into my practice. Here's a quote we got from one researcher who said, "One problem is just the overall explosion of material and the reduction of my time. I think all of us never seem to have enough time, and that's probably a universal." The second theme that we came from this research was staying up to date is important, especially in competitive research areas. Though some research areas like physics or high energy physics, synthetic organic chemistry are even more competitive, just finding and keeping on top of these things and what other people are doing and publishing as fast as possible research findings. And even in mathematics, that's true as well, though mathematics tends to be a slow, raw haul. We got this in a comment that one participant made was, we're all doing sort of cutting edge things, and we need to know where we stand compared to others. If something has been done, we should know about it and not do the same thing or replicate it using our research teams as well. Staying up to date is important, especially in competitive research areas. The third research theme I'd like to, finding of this particular research I'd like to share with you is we can do better. It was kind of enlightening to know that as academics, people on top of their research, researchers who would spend 20 or 30 years in the field, could universally say that, could say we could do better. We're open to learning because things change so fast. This was exemplified by a comment. There's a tendency to just throw something into Google Scholar, some sort of training for faculty, staff, and students at all levels as to how to make best use of the ever-increasing amounts of information that are available would really be valuable. So they recognize that there's learning to be done, and they can improve their information-seeking patterns of what they use, how they use it, and how it's applied to their own research. Ultimately, from our findings and observations, we find that researchers are anxious, they're overwhelmed by the amount of information, and they're kind of uncomfortable because ultimately they don't have successful strategies at any particular time to stay on top of the research, especially in competitive areas. This is a common problem that libraries may help to solve or help academic researchers feel better about how they actually do these processes. So in summary, findings that we found, I'd like to share with you, are academic researchers are overwhelmed by the volume and nature of new information. This is not getting any easier or any better, it's actually increasing it as a problem. Researchers use common but depend upon disciplinary database to remain current. This is a good finding because they know the resources they need to know to remain current, but really can implement the strategies so that they can be successful at any particular time for themselves and their research teams. Another summary is librarians like myself are well placed to provide timely assistance. We can inform, teach, and educate or work with researchers or research teams or students at any particular time to give them the soft skills and the hard skills and the technologies in order to be more successful in remaining up to date in their research endeavors. Culminating in this research were 3 scholarly peer-reviewed papers we're quite proud of and have been used. The first paper about chemists has been downloaded or reviewed 12,000 times since it was published not too long ago, and the other papers have been presented at conferences and are presented at seminars and webinars as well. Acknowledgements. I couldn't do this myself. My research team involved many people, including my co-investigators that are listed here, my colleague, university librarian, the Brock University Library, the Ontario College of University Librarians and Libraries who work with me as a team, my publisher for these articles, and Brock University Office of Research Ethics, which was important in conducting, validating, and verifying our research. At this time, I'd like to show you a few references that you can look at any time of our work, and other sources that may be important that I've cited or images that I've used as part of my presentation. Thank you for your presence. I look forward to any questions or comments you have, noting that our study, Information Seeking Strategies in Academic, Scholarly, and Scientific Research Communities, was a real passion of ours, and hopefully you caught that through this particular presentation. At that time, I conclude my presentation and ask if there's any questions or comments. Thank you.